So here's the third step or third stage of the process. And the first stage was to find something, piece of music that you like, and then either transcribe it or copy it into your notation program of choice, or by hand, that's up to you. And from there you would analyze orchestration, and after that, stage 2 was to reduce everything into the sketch score, and you can see the sketch score here. Like I said before, I use the melody at the top and then the accompaniment in the bottom, and a percussion stave. And just to recap, you'd only strip away the orchestration. At least that's how I do it. So everything is kept the same, and from there you would analyze it for what kind of elements there are, and also the harmony and the melodies, and if there's counterpoint or everything else musically, basically, because it's easier to see. And after that, as a sort of like a second stage B, would be to do the main thing sketch, where you took the most important element at any given time and just write that out on one single stave. Sort of like an outline for a book, just an outline for a piece. Okay, and after you've done that, it brings us to this stage. And this is a stage where you get to make your own version of using whatever you just learned. And as you will see here, my first version will be very close to the original. So close that I would never use this as a demo, or I mean, this is public domain stuff, so I could copy this until the cows come home and no one would be able to say anything. But you know, for your own sake, you don't want to be that guy who's who takes different pieces and you know, changing one note and says, "Oh, this is mine." But the point here, it's not about changing one note either. But it's the point is to make a very close version at first, so you're sure to keep everything intact, because so you don't change anything too much at first, because you want to be sure that you learn everything as it were. And we can just listen to this first and then check out what I did. Okay, so it's very similar, and another point by making it so similar is to make you write something that you haven't written before, because like I said in the first video, this is probably something you want to learn, something you're attracted to it because there's a sound you like, but you don't know how to get that sound yet. But now you do. Now you've analyzed the sound, and you hopefully came up with some solutions or some reasons why it sounds the way it sounds. So that's why you shouldn't be, you know, too concerned with originality at first. Just emulate it very closely, but still do it differently enough so that you at least put some sort of stamp on it yourself. And also when you do your own version, the first version, do it from memory. Don't look at the stuff that you've already analyzed. That's also one reason why I think it's a good way to it's a good practice to do this with shorter examples, because it's easier to remember, and you can do all these 3 stages in one sitting, or at least during the same day, if at all possible. Because after you've transcribed the original and written it down, and then analyzed it orchestrally, and then copied it again to the sketch and analyzed everything musically, label everything, and then finally do the main thing, sketch, you'll most likely have a pretty good idea of the music in your mind already. So put that away and then make your own version as well as you can. And then if you get stuck, you're unsure, sure, look at it, but at least try to do it from memory at first. Because then they found in studies that the way to put things from your short-term memory to your long-term memory is by actually trying to remember things. So forgetting things and then trying to remember what it was. And the more you do that, the better you'll get, and the faster it will get to your long-term memory. But back to this piece. So it's the sustain pad like before, and it's the same thing basically, same notes here, and in same key as well, so G minor. The only thing here that in the original he kept the pattern going for 4 bars. I changed the 4th bar, and the only change I do is going down here to the 2nd. So but this change, and this is a good thing to keep in mind if you work with a lot of repeating patterns in your music, which, you know, ostinatos is very popular now, that if you have a pattern that repeats, you have 1 bar that's and then you repeat that 1 bar 4 times, as in this case, it would sound pretty boring because you get 4 repeats. But if you have a 4-bar pattern like this, and you change the 4th bar, even if it's a very small change, your brain will hear this as 1 unit. So instead of hearing it as 4 separate units, you will hear it as 1. And that in turn, of course, will make it 1 repetition instead of 4. So it will make it less predictable and less boring for the listener. So that's a quick tip. But anyway, did this sustained pad pattern, and then it just keeps going. And the reason I didn't do it the same, I didn't repeat this pattern here, is because when the melody is going, I wanted to keep it on the keep it pretty subtle in the background. This is not the focus. This is just the accompaniment. So the focus is the melody, of course. And the melody, I took the exact same phrase structure, because that was something that was new to me. I haven't written like this before. And like I said, the purpose of this is to make you write something that you might not have come up with without learning what you just learned. So basically the same structure. So this longer phrase here, and then the shorter phrase that's repeated with the long note at first, and then repeated again. And when it repeats the 3rd time here, it repeats instantly instead of hanging out here for a bit. So again, the feeling is sort of like a compressed feeling, and it builds the energy up for the next phrase. And the last phrase, as in the original, I use longer note values, but I combine that with bigger intervals. And as you can see here, I actually change it, and I do listen to this. you see here when the smaller note values come in again, it's scalar instead of bigger intervals. So and our complement just keeps going as before. Nothing really strange or unusual, just as in the original. And here's the bridge in my version, and I use the same scale, the G melodic minor, but instead of starting on the G, I start on B flat, and by doing that I can I don't have to use the passing note, because as in the original I still needed 8 notes here, and the melodic minor scale only has 7. So by starting on the third, I can, and why I started on the third and not the second or some other interval is that it's the G minor here, so I start on the third of the chord, so that works better. And also when you start with a leap here, you want to connect it with this scalar movement, so it works well with it just works. So this is very, very vanilla compared to the original, actually. And as in the original, I really liked the way the bass came in. And the only thing I changed here was the rhythm, because I wanted a bit more active rhythm. So here's my version. And then the same thing, just keep the sustained pad going 1 octave higher, and the melody repeats as in the original, and then I have a fill as well, and it's the same rhythm as the original, but a different melody or pattern. So okay, so let's go to the orchestrated version. Okay, so here's the same thing orchestrated, and I use the exact same orchestration, which is kind of obvious since it was so such a sparse orchestration in the original, and I really liked that feeling. So the main thing I picked up from this was the orchestration and, well, specifically this sound, the flute and bassoon. That was important for me to emulate, but also the string bubbling in between. But let's just listen to it before I mumble along here. Okay, so very similar, and it works just as well, and it should be. If something would sound weird here, it's totally on you, because you already got the recipe set for you. So I don't think it's much more to talk about my version here, but like I said, this is the first version you do. And actually, a lot of times this is the only version I do, because I know that I trust that I have this recipe, so to speak, in my mind by now. And when I sit down to compose myself, I will remember, hopefully I will remember this sort of setup. I heard some people call it devices as well. So a device would be exactly this, sort of like well, you have this combination of elements and how that we have the flute up here and the strings in the middle and the bassoon here. That could be a device, but whatever you want to call it. But recipe, I like that actually. So I trust that I have this recipe, and then I move on to the next. And actually, I don't even save this stuff. I don't care. The thing is in the doing. So you learn by doing this stuff. It's great to look at this and see how you can do it. And I would love to, if you guys do something similar, I would love to see it as well. But for your own sake, it's like anything else. You learn by doing, not by just watching things. And that's why I feel this is more beneficial than score study as well. I mean, regular score study where you you sit with the score in hand and just follow along in the music. That's better than nothing. But I think when you really engage with the material like this, and especially this third stage where you get to try it out for yourself, that's where you really learn. And yeah, I just want to show you quickly how another version that I did. So this is a second version, and just to show you that you can use the exact same setup. Everything is the same, except I changed the tonality to Lydian, and everything else is pretty similar. So, and we can just listen to this thing, and then we can check it out more in detail. Okay, so if you would play this for someone, I don't hardly think anyone would feel like, hey, you stole that from Tchaikovsky's Symphony No. 1 in G minor, you bastard. That would not happen. It's not the most original thing, but as you can see, you can't really hear the similarities from where it was originated. And by now, if you watch all these videos, you can clearly see that it's very similar to the source material. But the difference here is a Lydian tonality. And a quick thing about modal stuff. And Lydian, that's one of the modes of the major scale. And if you're not familiar with the modes, it's basically, if you think about this, if you take the C major scale, you have all the white notes on the piano. If you would play C, and that's the first thing you hear, so you hear C as the root note. Let's say you hold down a C in the left hand. Any note you would play, any other white note you would play would sound like part of the C major scale, because it is. But if you would do the same thing, but you would play the D instead, and that would be the first note you'd hear, so your brain would hear that as the root note. If you play a D in the left hand, and then you play any of the other white notes, you improvise just on the white keys of the piano, it would sound not like C major, but it would sound like D Dorian. Because the mode based on the second note of the major scale is Dorian. So, and if you would have E as the bass, it would be a Phrygian, E Phrygian, and then F Lydian, G Mixolydian, A Aeolian, B Locrian. And actually the name of the major scale is Ionian. So that's the technical name for the major scale. But just as we call the mode based on the sixth note, A in this case, we call that the natural minor scale, or just the minor scale. that's the real name is Aeolian. But so the important thing here when you're writing modally is that the bass note or the root note of the key is very clear, because otherwise it can sort of creep into some other mode that has the same notes. So it's important to really cement that root note. And that's what I've done here with a pedal note. This element is called a pedal. And the pedal is really common. You mean in film scores you hear a low ominous sound. That's just a low pedal, or you know, that high, really high strings strings that come in beginning of a lot of cues. So and a pedal can really be in any register, but usually it's the root of the key or the fifth of the key. But we'll look at that more in depth later. But so that this is a pedal, and that's a accompaniment element, obviously. And the other different thing that I added here is the pitch pattern in the double basses when the melody comes in, because I wanted to establish the rhythm a bit more clearly, because it's kind of floaty. If you listen to so when the pitches really help to establish where one is, and pitch wise or harmony wise here it's just E major triad going into F sharp major triad, and then going back and forth. And another thing that's different here is that I use I don't stay on just between two notes here like in the original. I jump up to the next inversion, but the concept is the same. So I have two notes here that I want. So I have E and G sharp sounding all the time here because they alternate. This one goes E, G sharp, and this goes G sharp, E, like in the previous example. And then I have B and G sharp sounding here. So, and so on. But it's, so the harmony is just E, F sharp over E, because we have the E sounding here all the time. So that's a really good way to get the Lydian sound, to just have two major triads. Well, actually, you have the if you want a Lydian sound in C, for example, you would have a C major triad first, and then it goes up to a D major triad, but with the C in the bottom here. So just alternating that will get you a Lydian sound, and that's because of the what really makes it sound Lydian is that you have a sharp 4 or Fi. You have do, re, mi, fi, so instead of fa, so. And that sharp 4 is the major third of the triad built on the second step. Wow, that was a mouthful. But we can listen to it again, and then we'll check out the rest of it. Yeah, and another thing that I forgot to mention in the previous videos was about dynamics. As you can see here, the accompaniment is in piano, and then the melody is one step higher, mezzo piano. And that's really common to see in scores, that you have the accompaniment is usually one dynamic marking lower than the melody. So that's sort of a good, and there's some, it's not always that way, it depends on the context, but that's a good rule of thumb, and you see it so much that it's a good way to think, I feel. So and if you would go back to the original, I can do that really quickly here. And just do this. You'll see that the melody here, but this melody, this example was one dynamic marking lower. So you got piano in the melody, and the accompaniment here is pianissimo. And of course it grows a bit louder here. But so that's a good, I wouldn't say rule of thumb maybe, but it's a good thing to keep in mind when it comes to dynamics. So I don't know. Oh yeah, the other thing that was different here is that I doubled the flute line with the violins, just to give it a bit different sound. So, but otherwise it's basically the same recipe as the previous one, or as in the original. But the point here is that I took something that I liked, that recipe, and then I combined that with another tonality, and the result you get is something that sounds completely different. And a great thing about studying the old masters like this is that you know that whatever you pick up orchestrationally, and I mean idiomatically as well for the different instruments, idiomatic writing, well, basically anything you pick up from these scores, you know that will work if you would be so lucky to write for a real orchestra, because it has to work, because this is part of the repertoire for orchestras around the world. So it's based on real world principles and tested principles. So that's a really good way to teach yourself to write for orchestra, and know that you do that, and to make sure that everything you write will work. And Herb Spencer, John Williams' previous orchestrator, and he orchestrated a lot of stuff of Williams. He said in an interview that there's around 1,000 different devices, or recipes as I call them. And when you know them, you can score just about anything. And I will definitely take his word for it, because he was an amazing orchestrator and composer. So and what I really like about this way of working is that it gives you a solid way to practice composing, because that was a big thing for me when I started getting into composing, because I was like, how do I practice this besides just sitting down and composing, which of course is important, but I feel you get better much faster by doing something like this as well. Because I started out playing guitar, and when I started guitar, it was really clear cut for me, because it was like, yeah, I can do these technical exercises, and I learned this scale and this chord and this, this lick from this guitar player that I like, or this song, or this whatever I learned. I could apply it almost immediately. It was very clear how to, I practice this, and then I'll get better at improvising or whatever it may be. But I couldn't, when I started composing, I couldn't find such a clear way, because I would study from harmony books and counterpoint and read orchestration texts, but it was all, and I've seen a lot of books on these subjects, but it always felt like it was too separated from the final product, because none of these composers really sat down and, you know, you don't sit down and write like that. You don't separate everything. You want to combine it to make music. So, and I found that by actually studying music that I like, first of all was much more fun to do it, but also it sort of combines everything, and also don't worry about, you know, oh, maybe this is over my head and I can't do this. Just do as much as you can, and even if you just learn a little bit of each, I mean, you might not understand everything yet. That's just a good good way to know where you need to brush up your skills. So if you're really lost harmonically when you look at this, you know that, oh, maybe it's a good idea to study harmony. And also, if you know the time period that, let's say you're looking at something by Beethoven and you can't understand the harmony, you know that, oh, okay, I should really look at more romantic harmony. And I mean, there's so much material out there that's analyzed all these great composers and their styles to death, basically. You know, so if you want to delve deeper, and if you know specifically where your lack of knowledge is, it's much easier to pinpoint that and check that out, instead of sort of trying to learn everything from scratch in a linear fashion, because I don't think that, for most people, that doesn't work, and it can be really dry as well, really boring. Oh yeah, there's another thing. William Ross, the guy who I think I mentioned in the first video, who was one of the guys who gave me this idea on how to do this. He said that whenever he taught this to some student, they would invariably come back, and instead of actually choosing the exact place in a piece that they liked and that they want to learn, let's say they really liked bar 10 to 14 of a certain Beethoven piece, for example, or they would still try to learn everything up until that point, or even go beyond that point, just for the sake of completing everything. And he said that nobody actually did that, because they would get tired of it before they even got to the place that they wanted to be, or the actual part of the music that they liked. So his advice was to go directly to the part that you love and learn that first. And if you want to keep going, fine, do that, but don't feel that you have to complete any piece, because there's so much music out there. And if you would give 10 different composers, give them the same 2-minute piece of music and have them list their favorite moments, each list would look very different. So, and if you expand that to all the music that's out there, you can imagine how wildly different each list would be. So keep focusing on whatever you find interesting, and will fuel you to actually put in the time with the other stuff as well. And especially if you come up to if you constantly get confused when you see something harmonically, or I mean, if it's counterpoint or or if orchestrally you don't understand something, it's much easier to guide yourself and pinpoint that problem, and then use all the resources in form of harmony books and counterpoint and orchestration texts and everything like that that's available, which is great. Then it's really useful. So almost use it more. Use these books as well, encyclopedias, I guess. So you can look up things that you don't know yet. So that's my advice, at least, and that's where I've learned the most. Because whenever I try to, I'll do every exercise in this book and do it, from cover to cover. That lasts for a while, but it's usually very dry, and it feels so removed from the actual music that I love. So instead of trying to convert harmony exercises into music that you love, it's better to go to the music that you really like and see what's happening there, and then you reverse engineer the process, basically. And really, I mean, even if you couldn't name anything correctly when you analyze something, when you do this enough, you'll still recognize the difference between things. So eventually you'd be able to, if you analyze enough music, you wouldn't be able to name it in any correct way, but you would be able to write in that style. But the good thing about actually naming something and in the correct way and organizing it in your mind is that you learn it much more quickly compared to just winging it. So but the important thing is in the doing. So don't worry too much about the actual theoretical side of it. Yeah, I think that's about it. And I hope you learned something from this. And I'll keep doing more videos like this, and probably less talky. I felt like I was kind of bumbling through everything here, but I want to explain all the sketching and all that stuff. But in future videos I will just focus on the music, and probably for each piece make a video for each stage. So but the important thing here is that when you try this yourself, that you focus on the music that you're interested in. And also, if you do this and you happen to record it like this, please send me a link. I would love to see it. But anyway, if you like this, please like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll try my very best to keep this up.